Title: Shanghai Alerts. The world's most famous tech titan abandoned the mega tower it named after itself. Intro music thudding. Urgent cable news beat visual. Dramatic drone footage zooming down from the clouds, tracking a massive, tapered glass skyscraper piercing through the Shanghai smog. The glistening towers of the Pudong skyline faint Veritzen narrator. Voiceover. On the morning of January 8, 2018, tech billionaire Ma Yunpeng stood at the base of the newest, most aggressive megastructure in East China. He looked out at the sprawling, hyper-dense metropolis of Shanghai and declared a new era. Sound effect, camera shutters, sappeting. Dramatic horn blast in the music. Behind him loomed a staggering 1,070 feet of high-performance glass and reinforced steel. 61 floors of pure architectural ambition. This was the Yunpeng Tower, the tallest newly completed tech headquarters in the entire Yangtze River Delta region. Ma Yunpeng didn't just read his prepared remarks. He delivered a manifesto. He spoke of national pride, of bridging the wealth gap, and of the roaring digital economy. He looked up at the gleaming facade, gesturing to the migrant workers looking up from the busy avenues, to the families living in the dense, older micro-districts below. He told them this tower was a beacon. He told them the digital economy would lift everyone together. Ma Yunpeng, actor voiceover match, echoes dramatically, "I hope you look at this tower not as a monument of concrete, but as a symbol of shared prosperity for our city's future." Sound effect, wrecker scratch, music drops to a low, ominous drone narrator. Fast forward just a few years later. The story didn't just change. It completely disintegrated. By mid-2024, Yunpeng Tech was dumping more premium office space back onto the Shanghai market than the entire megatower contained. A corporate retreat so violent, it triggered shockwaves across the entire East China commercial real estate sector. If you are new to the channel, this is where we strip away the marketing gloss to expose the raw data behind the world's most expensive engineering and structural real estate shifts. We cover the massive symbols cities build to announce their arrival on the global stage, and the catastrophic fallout when the economic or physical foundation cracks. Text on screen. Subscribe and hit the bell. Subscribe now, because you cannot afford to miss what comes next. Music. Shift to a fast-paced, driven investigative beat to truly grasp how a 7.5 billion yen, 1.1 billion yen, crown jewel became an empty monument. You have to understand exactly what Yunpeng Tech represented to the Shanghai urban core. This wasn't just a software company. It was an economic empire, founded by Ma Yunpeng in a cramped, rented apartment in the Putuo district back in 1999. The company defied the classic tech playbook. When every other massive e-commerce and cloud platform fled to sprawling, low-density suburban tech parks on the distant fringes of Hangzhou or Shenzhen, Yunpeng Tech chose density. They stayed locked into the urban core, anchoring themselves right next to the historic financial center. They demanded high-rise prestige, vertical integration, and a vibrant, mixed-use street life that traditional suburban corporate campuses completely lacked. By 2018, they were the city's undisputed private sector heavyweight, commanding a local workforce of over 10,000 elite developers and engineers. The Yunpeng Tower was supposed to be the ultimate physical proof of their philosophy, that hyper-growth, civic dominance, and vertical architectural engineering could fuse seamlessly into the skyline visual. Architectural blueprints flashing over an animated 3D map of the Huangpu River developments. The engineering scale was staggering. Construction kicked off in 2013 on a premium plot previously occupied by an aging, defunct municipal bus terminal. The city demolished the old transit hub to clear a path for a glittering new, multi-tier, transit-oriented development zone. The master architect behind the glass giant was none other than the legendary Cesar Pelli's firm, world-renowned for defining modern megatall geometry. They handed Shanghai a masterpiece, a gracefully tapered, aerodynamic cylindrical silhouette that narrowed precisely as it pierced the sky. At its apex sat a massive crown outfitted with custom, high-intensity LED structural panels. Every single night, this crown cycled through a brilliant spectrum of shifting colors, acting as a permanent visual anchor visible from miles away across the Huangpu River. Even more ambitious was its structural integration. The tower was physically linked via an elevated pedestrian sky bridge to the newly constructed Yunpeng Park, a jaw-dropping, 5.4-acre public rooftop garden engineered right on top of the adjacent, multi-level high-speed transit hub, before a single cubic meter of high-strength concrete had even been poured into the foundational pilings. Yunpeng Tech signed a historic record-breaking pre-lease. They locked down over 700,000 square feet of the tower's total 1.4 million square feet of ultra-premium rentable area. That is more than half of $1 billion skyscraper, spoken for while it was still a hole in the ground. But their appetite didn't stop there. Just 1 block away, they leased a secondary, newly constructed 30-story skyscraper at 350 Century Avenue in its absolute entirety. It was promptly branded Yunpeng East. Together, these two structures gave the tech giant a real estate footprint that perfectly mirrored their explosive financial projections. In early 2019, with local premium office vacancy rates hovering at an all-time rock-bottom low of just 4.7%, and valuations climbing past $40,000 per square meter, the strategy looked bulletproof. The tower wasn't just built to stand. It was built to dominate. But the structural and economic forces of the next decade were preparing to tear the script apart. Music, intense, drum-driven track mixed with the sound of industrial drills and concrete mixers visual. Fast-paced time-lapse of the foundation excavation. Massive steel rebar cages, binonged into a deep muddy pit. High-contrast timestamps flashing on the screen. 2013, 2014, 2015 narrator. To engineer a 1,070-foot glass leviathan in the soft alluvial soil of the Yangtze River Delta requires defying the very ground you stand on. This isn't bedrock. This is layers of thick silt, clay, and waterlogged sand. The structural engineering chronology of the Yunpeng Tower is a masterclass in extreme load management. To prevent a 61-story tower from sinking into the earth, engineers had to drive a massive array of 426 high-strength, steel-reinforced concrete friction piles deep into the subterranean strata. Each piling punctured the earth down to a staggering depth of over 250 feet, hunting for stable soil layers capable of bearing the immense vertical pressure. Visual: a 3D CAD architectural animation showing the cross-section of the ontation design on top of these pilings. Workers completed a monumental continuous pour of high-performance concrete to form a monolithic foundation mat, a massive structural raft over 23 feet thick. This single, continuous pour required a synchronized fleet of concrete trucks rotating for over 48 hours straight, dumping millions of cubic meters of specialized cement to lock the tower's base into place. But in hyper-dense urban high-rise construction, engineering doesn't stop at gravity. It has to survive the brutal lateral forces of high-velocity coastal typhoons. The design utilized an ultra-dense central concrete core walls tied to exterior composite steel columns via giant structural outrigger trusses located at the 20th and 42nd floors. The exterior was wrapped in a high-performance glass curtain wall engineered to flex and shed wind loads, as the aerodynamic tapered shape channeled the air around the cylindrical form. Text on screen. The data collapse. Quarterly recurrings. By early 2020, the physical structure had proven its engineering stability. But the socio-economic foundation was about to experience a cataclysmic settlement event. When health and emergency management bureaus issued strict regional movement bans and work-from-home mandates in early 2020, the grand vertical experiment came to a screeching halt. The gleaming elevators slowed to a stop. The multi-level transit center fell silent. Sound effect: hollow wind blowing through a Nabal corridor like every massive conglomerate in East China. Yunpeng Tech immediately shifted its 10,000 urban employees to cloud-based remote workflows. For months, municipal inspectors and construction management firms watched the building's digital load trackers drop to near zero. But what happened next shocked the Municipal Construction Commission. The corporate leadership, obsessed with microdata, ran internal productivity assessments every single quarter during the remote phase. The findings were undeniable. Software development metrics didn't drop. Network optimization remained perfectly stable. Project delivery times actually improved. In October of 2020, during an urgent quarterly financial broadcast to major institutional investors. Ma Yunpeng delivered a statement that sent a shudder through every commercial real estate developer from Beijing to Guangzhou. Ma Yunpeng, actor voiceover match. The data is absolute. The traditional model of locking thousands of engineers into a centralized vertical block is dead. We are never going back to the way things were. Everyone in the industry knows it, even if they are afraid to admit it. Sound effect, heavy industrial clang, sound of papers. What followed was a meticulous, 3-year unwinding of the most expensive office portfolio in the city. The numbers recorded by the local Housing and Land Administration Bureau outline a corporate retreat of unprecedented proportions. March 2021, Yunpeng Tech executed a massive asset optimization maneuver, immediately subleasing 339,000 square feet of its space inside Yunpeng East to a major domestic e-commerce platform and a nationwide cosmetics retail chain. Simultaneous action. The company abruptly terminated a pre-construction lease agreement, additional 325,000 square feet in a nearby secondary tower project that hadn't even cleared its initial foundation inspection. February 2023, in a desperate consolidation move, the enterprise app giant Sushin, which Yunpeng Tech had acquired in a staggering 180 billion mega deal, completely abandoned its independent corporate headquarters in Shanghai's tech district. The remaining staff were ordered to pack their desks and squeeze into the leftover pockets of the main Yunpeng Tower. Visual. High-contrast data graph, showing vacancy rates, vertically contrasted against dropping real estate valuations. The structural damage to the real estate market peaked in January of 2023. Corporate headquarters announced a sweeping 10% global workforce reduction. In the Shanghai hub alone, 752 high-salary engineering positions were permanently erased in a single afternoon. Financial disclosures filed with the Securities Regulatory Commission revealed that Yunpeng Tech expected to absorb between 3.2 billion and 4.6 billion yen, 450 million yen to $650 million, in direct financial penalties and impairment charges purely related to early real estate lease exits and structural break fees. By April of 2023, the final blow to the secondary site landed. Yunpeng Tech threw the final remaining blocks of Yunpeng East onto the open sublease market. The 30-story skyscraper at 350 Century Avenue, the very building they had proudly leased in its absolute entirety just a decade prior, stood completely hollowed out. Not a single Yunpeng employee remained inside its walls. The final audit at the close of that fiscal year was devastating. Yunpeng Tech single-handedly held more vacant sublease space than any other enterprise in the history of the municipal financial district. Over 700,000 square feet of premium space was dumped onto the market simultaneously. Think about the scale of that engineering space. The flagship Yunpeng Tower contains 1.4 million square feet of rentable area. The very anchor tenant whose name dominated the building's illuminated crown was trying to offload an amount of office space equivalent to more than half of the entire landmark skyscraper. When you aggregate the total square footage shed across the primary tower, their secondary towers, and their auxiliary tech spaces across downtown, the total figure surpassed 1 million square feet. An entire vertical megastructure's worth of engineering space, completely abandoned and thrown back into a market that was already starting to drown. Music. Low foreboding synth bass line that building up with an echoing clicking sound, like a ticking clock visual. Panoramic shot of downtown Shanghai under a gray sky. Tracking shot over the rooftops, focusing on gleaming kubut, silent glass facades. Text on screen flash, the macro collapse narrator. What happened at the Yunpeng Tower was not an isolated corporate anomaly. It was the epicenter of a structural shockwave tearing through the very fabric of China's modern mega-tall urban landscape. To truly comprehend the gravity of a 37% citywide office vacancy rate, you have to realize that this signature tower was just one domino in a massive line of failing vertical investments spanning across every Tier 1 economic hub in the nation. Sound effect, distant crash. Let's look at the hard, unyielding data recorded by municipal housing bureaus across the country by mid-2024. In the second quarter of 2019, Shanghai's premium office vacancy rate was a pristine, hyper-profitable 4.7%. 5 years later, that figure hit a staggering 37%. It is the highest vacancy rate ever recorded in the commercial history of the municipality. In the south of market equivalent, the gleaming, tech-heavy Lujiazui and Century Avenue corridors where the Yunpeng Tower holds its ground. The numbers look even more apocalyptic. The vacancy rate in these hyper-concentrated tech zones peaked at an unbelievable 45% visual. Animated map of China focusing on major skyscraper clusters in Shenzhen, Guangzhou, and Tianjin. Blinking red, think about that physical reality. Across downtown, entire multi-billion-dollar office blocks built during the explosive technology and venture capital boom of the 2010s sit more than half empty. The math is simple, and it is horrifying. The sheer volume of empty office space languishing across Shanghai is the exact physical equivalent of 21 Yunpeng towers. Every square meter of 21 massive skyscrapers, completely hollow, silent, and devoid of human activity, property values that had peaked at over 70,000 per square meter in the roaring market of 2022 were being openly listed and liquidated at a brutal 22,000 per square meter by mid-2024. This market freefall forced municipal construction commissions and tax bureaus to revise their commercial real estate tax revenue projections downward by more than 7 billion yens. Local budget deficits were officially forecast to swell past 10 billions by 2027. But look beyond Shanghai. The parallels across China's architectural landscape show that the golden age of the vertical tech empire has hit a concrete wall. Take a look at Shenzhen, the undisputed tech hub of South China. Visual, stock roll footage of urban sections of Shenzhen and unfinished clusters in the border zones for a decade. Developers in Shenzhen's Qianhai and Nanshan districts rushed to construct hyper-tall glass towers to house the soaring headcount of hardware and software conglomerates. Yet, by 2024, the citywide office vacancy rate in Shenzhen hovered stubbornly near 30%. Massive structural complexes designed to act as vertical cities find themselves operating with ghost town occupancy rates. Even more stark is the parallel to the infamous Golden Finance 117 tower in Tianjin. That megatall project was designed to soar to a mind-boggling 1,957 feet, wrapped in ultra-premium glass curtain walls, meant to symbolize the industrial and financial arrival of North China. Today, it stands as the tallest unfinished building in the world. A structural husk piercing the skyline, trapped in a cycle of funding halts and market irrelevance, because the demand for massive, centralized physical office floor plates evaporated before the final concrete pour could even clear municipal inspection. Sans defect, heavy metallic thud go west to Chongqing and Chengdu, where luxury waterfront high-rises and tech development zones were built at a record-breaking pace. In those inland megacities, developers leveraged aggressive credit lines to build out mixed-use megastructures integrated with sprawling subway systems. Now, local housing authorities are grappling with massive, under-occupied glass blocks where the projected high-paying corporate tenants simply never materialized. The core engineering problem across all of these regions isn't just about civil engineering or structural stability. It is a fundamental misalignment between physical space and the digital reality of the modern white-collar workforce. Visual, close-up of the Yunpeng Tower. Illuminated, crown flashing brilliantly at night, contrasted against the completely dark window of a floor, immediately below the past. A city announced its dominance by building the highest, most complex structural core possible. The China Academy of Building Research set rigorous, world-leading standards for high-strength concrete mixes and seismic dampening systems to ensure these towers could survive for centuries. But no engineering standard can protect a building when its economic anchor chooses to simply walk away. Ma Yunpeng, watching the slow-motion collapse of the local commercial ecosystem from his executive suite inside the tower that still bears his name, grew increasingly bitter about the state of the surrounding urban core. The relationship between the billionaire, his architectural monument, and the municipal authorities was about to fracture under the weight of the changing economic landscape. And the friction was playing out right on the streets below. Music, Shift to a tense, melancholic undermixed with subdued urban noise. The sound of distant traffic, subway trains running on tracks, and footsteps on pavement visual, cut to street level. Candid high-contrast footage of citizens walking past the massive base of the Yunpeng Tower. The glass walls towers hundreds of meters upward, reflecting the clouds, while life at the ballon goes on narrator. Behind every skyscraper that empties out, behind every multi-billion yuan shift in the real estate ledger, there is a human cost. When you empty 1 million square feet of office space across a centralized urban district, you aren't just changing corporate balance sheets. You are altering the daily survival of the people who built their entire lives around the promise of that vertical city. To understand the real-world friction inside the Shanghai financial district by 2024, you have to look past the soaring glass facade designed by Cesar Pelli and look directly at the pavement below. You have to look at the personal stories of those caught in the wake of Yunpeng Tech's massive structural retreat. Text on screen. Part 4. The street-level fallow meet Zhang Wei. For nearly 7 years, Zhang operated a specialized high-capacity commercial printing and corporate logistics hub located just 2 blocks behind the secondary tower, Yunpeng East, on Century Avenue. When Yunpeng Tech leased all 30 stories of that building a decade ago, Zhang took out a massive microloan of over 1.5 million yens to upgrade his industrial plotting machines, purchase high-speed digital binding equipment, and secure a premium long-term lease on his storefront, Zhang Wei, actor voiceover match. When the tower was full, my shop ran 24 hours a day. We printed internal training manuals, massive marketing banners for tech product launches, blueprints for software architecture, and corporate portfolios. Every single day, hundreds of young tech workers would walk through my door. Yunpeng East was a machine that fed the entire neighborhood. Then, in early 2021, it felt like someone turned off the power to the whole block. Sound effect, the sound of an industrial printer slowly wiring down to a dead-stop narrator. When Yunpeng Tech executed its sudden asset optimization maneuver and subleased half the building before abandoning it entirely, Zhang's primary revenue stream vanished. The domestic e-commerce platform and the cosmetics chain that took over small fractions of the subleased space utilized decentralized, fully digital operations. They didn't need paper. They didn't need physical corporate binders. By the time Yunpeng Tech officially emptied the remaining floors of Yunpeng East in April 2023, Zhang's monthly revenue had cratered by a devastating 82%. By mid-2024, unable to cover his steep commercial rent, and with his advanced printing equipment valued at mere pennies on the secondary liquidation market, Zhang was forced to default on his loans, lay off his 4 employees, and shutter his business permanently. His personal damage figures exceeded 1.2 million yen in unrecoverable capital. He is just one of dozens of small business operators along the corridor whose economic foundation was pulverized when the tech giant pulled its workforce out of the urban core. Visual. Dramatic reconstruction, satellite, map showing the density of food and services surrounding Century Avenue in 2018 versus the vacant slots in 2024. But the fallout climbs much higher than the retail ground floor. The structural vacancy epidemic created severe, unprecedented challenges for the property management firms and engineering inspectors tasked with maintaining these massive high-rise systems. Consider the reality faced by Li Jun, a veteran structural systems engineer who spent 5 years managing the mechanical, electrical, and plumbing infrastructure for the primary Yunpeng Tower. High-rise buildings are not static monuments. They are highly dynamic engineering ecosystems designed for constant human occupancy. Li Jun, actor voiceover match. People don't realize that an empty skyscraper is a dying skyscraper. A tower designed for 15,000 active occupants experiences severe structural and mechanical issues when only a fraction of that number walks through the turnstiles. The entire HVAC system, the water circulation networks, the elevator weight distributions, they are all engineered based on high-density loads. Sound effect, ominous echoing metallic crick narrator. According to internal maintenance logs from property managers working in the south of market equivalent districts of Shanghai, when entire floors sit empty for consecutive quarters, The lack of active water usage causes severe air trap failures in the vertical plumbing stacks. Without constant flow, stagnant water accelerates microbacterial corrosion inside the massive galvanized piping networks. Even more critical is the thermal beltsense. When dozens of floors are unoccupied, they lack the ambient heat generated by thousands of computers, server closets, and human bodies. This creates massive unpredicted indoor thermal gradients between the occupied and unoccupied zones of the tower during the freezing winter months of East China. These extreme temperature variances cause the massive glass curtain walls to experience localized thermal stress. Property inspection teams began recording subtle warping in the structural sealants and silicone gaskets holding the high-performance glass exterior panels in place. If these sealants degrade prematurely due to erratic indoor temperature zoning, the risk of moisture penetration and localized glass structural failures rises exponentially. The maintenance costs to prevent this structural decay have ballooned, even as rent collection plummet. Visual, editorial archive footage of Ma Yunpeng apart from the public. Looking concerned at As the physical and economic landscape cracked, the billionaire behind the empire, Ma Yunpeng, became increasingly isolated and vocal. The man who stood at the podium in 2018, promoting shared prosperity, was now watching his grand corporate monument turn into a public case study on tech-driven urban decay. The relationship between Yunpeng Tech and the Shanghai municipal authorities hit an absolute breaking point in August of 2023, ahead of the annual Cloud Nexus Summit. For over 2 decades, this massive tech and developer conference was the crown jewel of Shanghai's digital calendar, drawing over 40,000 high-spending industry professionals, international investors, and elite software engineers to the city every single year. It pumped hundreds of millions of yuan directly into the local hospitality, retail, and transport infrastructure. But weeks before the doors were set to open, Ma Yunpeng shocked the Municipal Construction Commission and local tourism bureaus. In a scathing interview with a prominent economic journal, he openly lashed out at the deteriorating conditions of the downtown core surrounding the financial district. He pointed directly to the visible rise in street-level economic distress, the increase in empty commercial storefronts, and the mounting security strain on local districts. Ma Yunpeng, voiceover match dramatization. If the municipal authorities cannot guarantee an elite, seamless, and secure environment for our global attendees, if the street-level reality of this district continues to resemble a structural train wreck, then this will be the absolute last time the Cloud Nexus Summit is held within Shanghai borders. We will take our entire ecosystem, our capital, and our events somewhere else, to a region that actually maintains its infrastructure. Sound effect, a sharp twang of suspense in the music narrator. The public backlash was immediate. The very man who had positioned his 1,070-foot tower as a beacon of hope, an architectural proof that the ultra-wealthy tech elite were thinking of the families struggling on the sidewalks below, was now using his massive leverage to threaten the city's economic prestige. Behind closed doors at the Municipal Housing Bureau and the Construction Commission, officials scrambles to manage the fallout. The city could not afford to lose the Cloud Nexus Summit, not when their commercial tax revenue projections were already facing a multi-billion yuan deficit. In an attempt to smooth over the public relations disaster, Ma Yunpeng quietly announced a personal, highly publicized 7 million yen donation to a prominent municipal social welfare and emergency medical rescue foundation. The municipal sanitation and public security bureaus deployed massive rapid cleanup crews to scour the avenues and public spaces surrounding the Century Avenue corridor, ensuring the streets were spotless for the arrival of the international tech delegates. The 2023 conference went ahead as planned. The elite arrived, the lights flashed, and the keynotes were delivered. But the underlying structural rot could not be hidden by temporary measures. The physical reality remained. The company that built the tallest beacon in the district had fundamentally broken its contract with the urban core. The skyscrapers built during the great tech boom were designed for a future that no longer exists, leaving the workers, the engineers, and the city itself to navigate a landscape filled with millions of square meters of empty, glistening glass. Music. Shift to a slow, heavy, industrial synth outro with a metronomic beat, simulating the steady passage of time. Extended drone shot of the Shanghai skyline at dusk. The Yunpeng Tower glows brilliantly in the center of the frame, while the camera slowly pulls back to reveal the vast municipality drowning in twilight shadows. To radar, the Yunpeng Tower still stands at 415 Century Avenue. The massive metallic characters spelling out the tech titan's name remain permanently affixed to the primary entrance facade. The building has not shifted an inch on its massive foundation mat. It has not tipped over. It hasn't suffered a catastrophic material failure. The real estate giant Huaxia Properties, which owns the physical skyscraper outright, still collects its massive monthly lease payments from the remaining tenants inside, including Yunpeng Tech, whose legally binding long-term lease commitment runs all the way until 2031. Sound effect. Distant hum of high-voltage generators every single night, without fail. The monumental structural crown at the top of the 61-story Leviathan illuminates exactly on schedule. It cycles through its vibrant, computer-controlled spectrum of emerald, crimson, and sapphire hues, piercing through the low coastal clouds, visible from miles away across the waters of the Huangpu River. It remains the most dominant, unyielding silhouette on the local skyline, a margin of engineering height that makes every surrounding commercial office block look tiny by comparison. The sprawling, 5.4-acre public rooftop garden constructed on top of the multi-level transit center next door remains open to the public, impeccably manicured by municipal maintenance crews. Everything looks exactly as it was designed to look. But what has fundamentally changed is what the building means. Text on screen. Part 5. The Emedade Risquen, Ma Yunpeng stood before the cameras on January 8, 2018, and defined this 1,070-foot glass monolith as a beacon of hope. He was issuing an absolute structural claim about the future of human organization. He was asserting that the digital economy, the staggering accumulation of modern technology wealth, and the physical density of the traditional urban core could coexist, lock steps, and build upward forever, rather than sprawling outward into the provincial countryside. The tower was meant to be physical, architectural proof that the largest private employer in East China was permanently tethered to the fate of the city by 2026. That claim has been utterly dismantled by the data. Visual series of high-contrast graphics showing skyscraper silhouettes transitioning from bright green to faint, hollowed out outlines. More than a third of every premium office building across the entire municipal financial district sits completely vacant. The very tech conglomerate that lent its name to the tallest tower in the zone has shed enough physical square footage across its urban portfolio to fill a massive skyscraper entirely of its own. The structural vacancy epidemic isn't shrinking. It has embedded itself into the financial and operational models of the modern white-collar world. The deep engineering irony is that the building does not move. It cannot adapt. It holds its exact, unyielding coordinates on the skyline in 2026, the precise same way it did on that crisp morning in 2018, when the crowds gathered at its base to cheer for the future. It remains a beacon. The question that municipal planners, institutional investors, and structural engineers from Shenzhen to Beijing are now forced to confront is simple. What exactly is it a beacon of now? Is it a monument to a golden era of hyper-centralized corporate growth that will never return? Or is it a towering 61-story warning sign of what happens when a city builds its skyline for an economy of physical concrete, only to watch that economy dissolve entirely into the digital cloud? Sound effect, a final, resonant drone strike. As the lights of the Yunpeng Tower flicker against the Shanghai night, the empty floors inside remain completely dark, a silent testament to a vertical empire that built itself all the way to the clouds, only to find that nobody was waiting for them at the top. Visual fade to black. Channel send screen appears with recommended videos on high-rise engineering and urban decay. Audio. Music fades.